So Ryan did a really good job of kind of giving us the outlook of the benefits of Web3 and how Polkadot is facilitating the ecosystem moving forward. But I wanted to take an opportunity to kind of take a step back and look at how us at the Web3 Foundation look at the ecosystem from a macro point of view. So one of the resources that we've developed is the Web3 tech stack. So looking at it from the user's perspective, we start out with the interfacing with the dApp, which needs to rely on a user interface cradle like a browser, for instance, something like MetaMask, Status, or Brave. And after that, we need to rely on some sort of language or API such as Rust. There's some developer tools like Clover coming out that are working with the Web3 Foundation for Polkadot. And then under that, we have the layer 2 solutions such as state channels, oracles, Plasma. There's projects such as Ocean Protocol that are working with the foundation to kind of interface with Polkadot moving forward. And then layer 1 is where you have the blockchains such as Ethereum, Tezos, and then the zero trust interaction platforms which share security, which is essentially what Polkadot is. Then you have data distribution protocols such as IPFS, transient pub/sub messaging like Whisper, and at the bottom layer you have peer-to-peer internet overlay protocols like P2P, and platform-neutral computation description language like WASM. So as you can see, Polkadot is a very small subset of this entire tech stack, and in order for applications and users to actually utilize the technology and benefit from it, we need all this ecosystem to interoperate and work and collaborate in order to move that forward. So one of the biggest concerns in the ecosystem right now is where are the users, who are the users, and are their needs being met? So if we take a step back and look at the technology adoption lifecycle and then map Gartner's hype cycle on top of that, we can start to see patterns of where we were last year as far as somewhat inflated expectations and what direction we're going to be going towards in the next year or two with the technology. So interestingly enough, this actually comes from Chris McCann's blog post. The estimated crypto user growth versus the internet user growth for the first 6 years is quite comparable. It's interesting to note this because from our vantage point, it seems like we don't have much user adoption. But the next question then becomes, where are the killer apps? So taking a look at the Ethereum and I believe it's EOS and POA network, there's a total of almost 2,300 applications as of yesterday, with a daily active user base of 65,000 people using those applications, of which are, I believe, only 1,300 are active. So as you can see, active users for this technology is not very impressive, but we also have about 1.78 million transactions happening. And most of the concentration for these apps is in storage, exchanges, finance, and gambling. So what this means is that it's difficult for applications to not only maintain decentralized qualities, but also provide a great user experience and functionality. So I don't know if there's anyone in the room who's actually trying to do product development with this technology, but you're basically beating your head against the wall trying to make something that's usable and user-friendly. So interesting conversation that happened earlier from Danny Grant and Nick Grossman from USV. They hypothesized that since no one is really building on these platforms, that apps actually beget infrastructure. I don't really agree with their hypothesis, but I think a key thing to note from the conversation that they're trying to have is that apps and infrastructure evolve in responsive cycles and not distinct separate phases. So going back to Ryan's point of like experimentation and reiteration of going through that process of having apps that inform the infrastructure stack and then building on top of that. So hasn't been too many applications in the ecosystem that have pushed the boundaries of what the infrastructure is, and in my opinion, I don't think those killer apps are coming anytime soon because of the limitations of the ecosystem that we're functioning within. So for example, the current landscape actually has a lot of missing pieces when you look at the tech stack. So things such as identity, stable coins, anything that you want users to actually use your application for, you need a lot of different layers and moving parts that need to be fitting together. Then on top of that, to complicate the matters further, there's a lot of teams working in siloed manner to create solutions for these problems, which leads to new mental models that people aren't really used to when interfacing with applications, and which leads to a lack of usability. So the goal for the Web3 Foundation is to focus on collaboration, interoperability, experimentation, and then iteration. So ensuring that all these teams that are actually working on these solutions start to interface with each other and share their learnings and figure out ways that we can move the ecosystem forward in a faster manner. Because right now there's a lot of work being done in walled gardens that are not conducive to systems being built for a long term. So essentially what we hope to kind of advocate is let us build together. So pick up systems where you see missing parts, look around for good tech to actually build on top of, make it easy for others to build on top of your tech, and then be sure that you're communicating how your project will be useful for other protocols, and that it will enable usability going up the stack for that builders that are actually going to build usable interfaces on top of this technology. And we have to be also very mindful that we are the few people that are actually having the ability to create these solutions for the future of human interactions and how crypto economics and governance will be looked at moving forward. So we have to ensure that we're creating systems that do not marginalize people and sectors moving forward. So taking a look at people that will actually benefit a lot from this technology and making sure that we create the infrastructure that is reliable for them. So making sure that we don't have to actually create the solutions that take into account third world countries, but we have to ensure that the infrastructure and the opportunities are there available for people to actually leverage these technologies when they have the opportunity to do so. So, like the lovely gentleman in the back that mentioned, there's quite a few issues when it comes to Web3 UX, and as a part of a community effort, we've done a lot of research and interviewing with all the large projects in the space and seeing what are the big issues that they're actually facing and how can we help them solve those issues. So when you actually start dealing with people interfacing with the Web3 technologies, there's a lot of issues that come up. They don't really know why they should actually care about decentralization. Why do they have to pay for gas? They think they can reset private keys, and they kind of think that private keys are somewhat like passwords. They don't really understand that your actions on the blockchains are irrevocable, and that there's no recoverability mechanisms kind of built into the systems. So talking to large projects like MyCrypto, MetaMask, and any of the larger ecosystem players that actually have user bases, we kind of highlighted quite a few issues with key management because it actually disrupts the onboarding flow of the users. So people don't know to back up these keys, know where to back them up, or how to actually back them up. There's quite a bit of confusion between passwords and private keys. So there's a key insight that we learned from MyCrypto was that a lot of people actually give tickets to things like Etherscan because they don't understand what role each thing plays. So some emerging patterns in this area to kind of help solve these issues are progressive tier security models. So basically ensuring that users have the proper education given to them in a tiered manner so that they can understand what's actually going on. There's also such things as disposable keys that the users do not actually have to back up, and then multiple device private keys on local wallets. In addition, gas is just a very novel experience for people. They don't really comprehend why it's needed, who gets it, what foundation is taking care of it. A lot of people think that the gas is actually transaction cost that goes to the applications. So the concepts and terminology around gas are also very counterintuitive. Variations in gas prices don't really help you create products that are conducive to mass adoption use cases. Some emerging patterns in this area have to deal with abstracting gas interactions for new users. So things such as universal logins, relayers, and meta transactions are being worked on to kind of help spearhead these efforts. Another option is to kind of give modular options for advanced users, so giving them the option to do low, medium, or high. And then one key thing is needed is gas stations for a way to standardize gas across the ecosystem. As far as transactions, people don't really understand, like I mentioned, the difference between, or the relationship between transactions, wallets, the blockchain, and blockchain explorers as they are. So they make mistakes sending the same transaction multiple times, or they're confused by the whole concept of even sending a transaction and sending them multiple times. So emerging patterns in this space are giving human readable and transparency to transactions. So projects such as NatSpec and RadSpec are kind of working on this. And then in-app history of transactions with the appropriate context. So giving indicators and better UI indicators for people to move on. And then perhaps providing some sort of transaction queue manager for multiple transactions. So the key highlight of this was to kind of highlight some of the efforts that we're doing at the Web3 Foundation as far as the grants. These are 2 efforts recently launched. So if you're interested in helping solve the bigger Web3 technology issues, or want to collaborate with us in any manner, feel free to reach out to me directly or go through the appropriate channels. We also recently have launched a research forum where a lot of the research that's being done at the Web3 Foundation will be housed, and we're hoping to engage the community to make sure that we have the appropriate feedback loops coming in and making sure that the systems that we're designing moving forward do not have these intrinsic design issues for usability, and making sure that people can actually start using these as applications moving forward. That's it for me now, and David's going to take over and kind of give us a walkthrough of setting up a Polkadot node, or yeah, all right, perfect, thank you.